the sound of a middle class dying. December 2001, the Cacerolazo, the night of the pots and pans. This isn't a violent uprising of the poor. These are doctors, lawyers, and shopkeepers. Meet Elena. She's a 60-year-old school teacher. She has never broken a law in her life. But tonight, she is trying to break into an ATM with a hammer. Inside that machine is 40,000 US dollars, her entire life's savings. The money she put away for 20 years so she wouldn't be a burden to her children. Yesterday, the government told Elena that her money was safe. Today, they told her she cannot touch it. And tomorrow, they will tell her it doesn't exist. How does a nation that was once richer than France, Germany, and Italy end up stealing from its own grandmothers? To answer this, we cannot just look at the crash. We have to look at the addiction that caused it. This is the story of a country that got hooked on a drug called the short term. This is Argentina, the wealth paradox. To understand the tragedy, you have to understand the blessing, and the blessing is the soil. This is the Pampas, a flat, hyper-fertile plain larger than France. In the late 19th century, this was the world's winning lottery ticket. While Americans had to blast through mountains and Russians had to fight the frost, Argentines just had to throw seeds on the ground. The climate was so mild that cattle didn't even need barns. They grazed year-round. It was free money. And by 1900, with the invention of the refrigerated ship, that meat could travel. The numbers from this era are staggering. Between 1880 and 1914, Argentina's GDP grew at an annual rate of 6%, the fastest in the world. By 1913, Argentina was the 10th richest nation on Earth per capita. It was wealthier than Spain, Italy, and Japan. It had more cars per capita than France. In London, the financial capital of the world, Argentina was known as the sixth dominion of the British Empire. They didn't fly the Union Jack, but they might as well have. British investors owned 60% of the foreign capital in Argentina. They built the railways, the ports, and the sewage systems. The relationship was symbiotic. Argentina provided the cheap beef that fed the British working class. Britain provided the capital that built Buenos Aires. But this golden age hid a fatal structural flaw. The wealth was narrow. It was concentrated in the hands of a few hundred land-owning families, the oligarchy. And critically, the country didn't industrialize. They didn't build the trains, they just bought them. They didn't build factories, they just sold cows. They bet the entire national existence on one assumption, that the world would always want to buy their beef. 1929, the Great Depression. The global trade system collapses. The United Kingdom, desperate to save its own economy, signs the Ottawa Agreements, favoring trade with its official colonies like Australia and Canada. Argentina is locked out. The beef exports plummeted. The money stopped flowing. And when the money stops, the politics break. In 1930, a military coup ended nearly 70 years of constitutional order. This began the infamous decade. But the true turning point, the moment the Argentine soul changed, came in 1946. Enter Colonel Juan Domingo Perón. Perón wasn't just a politician, he was a reaction to the oligarchy. He looked at the rich landowners and the British railways and decided they were the enemy. He stood on the balcony of the Casa Rosada and offered a new deal to the descamisados, the shirtless ones. He introduced a policy that would define the next century: import substitution industrialization. The logic was, the world has abandoned us, so we will make everything ourselves. We will make our own steel, our own cars, our own fridges. But factories are expensive. Who pays for them? Perón created a state monopoly called IAPI, Here is how it worked. If you were a farmer, you were illegal if you sold your wheat to Europe. You had to sell it to the government at a price the government set, usually dirt cheap. The government then sold that wheat abroad at the full market price. They took the difference, the profit, and used it to subsidize an industrial sector that couldn't compete globally. It was a massive transfer of wealth from the countryside to the city. For a few years, it worked. Wages rose by 30%. The working class could finally afford vacations. Perón and his wife Eva became saints, but they were eating the seed corn. By punishing the farmers to feed the factories, they destroyed the incentive to farm. Agricultural production stagnated. The green goose that laid the golden eggs stopped laying. By 1950, the money ran out. But Perón couldn't cut spending. That would be political suicide. So he did what every Argentine government has done since. He printed money. Inflation jumped to 50%. The cycle had begun. What followed was not stability, but a violent pendulum. For 30 years, Argentina swung between military dictatorships that tried to enforce discipline and weak civilian governments that tried to spend their way to popularity. The low point came in 1976. The military junta took power. They didn't just disappear 30,000 citizens in a brutal, dirty war. They exploded the debt. They opened the financial markets, but kept the industry protected, the worst of both worlds. Foreign debt rose from $8 billion to $45 billion in just 7 years. They tried to distract the populace with a war for the Falkland Islands in 1982. They lost. The dictatorship collapsed. Democracy returned in 1983, but the economic bomb was ticking. By 1989, under President Alfonsín, the country hit the wall: hyperinflation. This is crucial context for Elena's story. In 1989, inflation hit 3,000%. Prices changed twice a day. Shopkeepers stopped using price tags. They just shouted the new prices every hour. People were looting supermarkets not for TVs, but for pasta and milk. Elena, then in her 40s, saw her salary evaporate before she could spend it. The psychological scarring of 1989 explains everything that happened next. The people were desperate for order. They didn't care about sovereignty or industry anymore. They just wanted a currency that didn't melt in their hands. Enter Carlos Menem in the 1990s, a man with big sideburns and a Ferrari. He brought in a Harvard-educated economist named Domingo Cavallo, who had a radical idea to kill inflation: the convertibility plan. They passed a law. 1 Argentine peso is worth exactly $1 US. But you can't just say a peso is a dollar. You have to prove it. The central bank was legally required to hold $1 US in the vault for every single peso they printed. If they didn't have the dollar, they couldn't print the peso. It worked like magic. Inflation dropped from 3,000% to 3% in a year. Suddenly, Argentines could buy imported TVs, travel to Miami, and take out mortgages. The pizza and champagne era began. This is when Elena sold her house. She put $40,000 in the bank. And why wouldn't she? The bank was paying high interest, and the government promised the exchange rate was immutable. But there was a catch, a deadly catch. By tying the peso to the dollar, Argentina tied its economy to the U.S. Federal Reserve. When the U.S. economy is strong, the dollar gets strong. In the late 90s, the the dollar soared. This made Argentine products incredibly expensive for the rest of the world. Brazil devalued their currency. Mexico devalued. Their goods became cheap. Argentina couldn't devalue. Their exports died. Factories closed. Unemployment hit 18%. The government was trapped. They couldn't print money, the law forbade it. They couldn't sell exports, too expensive. But they refused to cut spending. So, how did they pay the bills? They borrowed. They borrowed massive amounts from the IMF to keep the dollars in the vault, to maintain the illusion of the peg. It was a Ponzi scheme on a national scale. December 2001. The IMF looks at the books and realizes Argentina can never pay this back. They cut the line of credit. The vault is empty. On December 1st, Finance Minister Cavallo announces El Corralito, the little pen. To stop a bank run, he freezes the accounts. You can withdraw 250 pesos a week. That's it. Elena goes to her branch. She needs money for her medication. She asks for her $40,000. The manager, a man she has known for a decade, shakes his head. It's electronic, Elena. I can't give it to you. The middle class realizes they have been looted to pay the foreign debt. The city explodes. On December 19th, the president declares a state of siege. That night, the cacerolazo begins. 5 people are killed in the Plaza de Mayo. President de la Rua flees via helicopter from the roof of the Pink House. For 2 weeks, Argentina had 5 presidents. One of them, Adolfo Rodriguez Sá, lasted only 7 days, just long enough to announce the largest sovereign debt default in the history of humanity. $93 billion. But the final blow came in January. The new government announced pesification. They ended the one-to-one peg. Elena's $40,000 savings were forcibly converted into pesos at an artificial rate of 1.40. But on the street, the peso crashed to 4 to the dollar. In real terms, Elena lost 75% of her life's work in 2 weeks. It wasn't a market crash. It was a liquidation of the middle class to save the state. The trauma of 2001 rewired the Argentine brain. In the years that followed, luck returned. The soybean supercycle brought massive cash into the country. But the government didn't use it to fix the structural problems. They used it for subsidies to buy votes. When the soy price dropped, the inflation returned. Today, Argentines live in a bi-monetary psychosis. They spend in pesos, but they think in dollars. It is estimated that Argentine citizens hold over $200 billion in physical cash, hidden in mattresses, walls, and safety deposit boxes. That is more physical US currency than exists anywhere outside the United States and Russia. The wealth is there. It is just hiding from the state. This is Elena's grandson. He works as a freelance coder. He gets paid in crypto. He keeps his assets on a cold storage drive. He doesn't pay taxes if he can help it. He views the state not as a protector, but as a predator. He learned the lesson his grandmother paid for. The soil of the Pampas is just as fertile today as it was in 1910. The cows are just as fat. But the ground that truly matters, the common ground of trust between a citizen and their state, has been salted. And nothing grows on salted earth. If you found value in this analysis, consider subscribing to Orbis as we continue mapping the world's untold stories. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you believe a country can ever truly rebuild trust once the contract is broken? I'll see you in the next one.